The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. And it is signing day 2025. Nebraska landing 20 commits for this class and immediate impact. A bit of a theme. We'll talk about it. Mike Babcock going to be with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports in hour two. The bearded guru makes his return. Mike Schaefer with us from Husker 24/7 Sports. Evan Bland also joins us. We'll sneak in a Jock Doc and talk Christian McCaffrey. You're welcome to jump on in at 489-1240, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. We'll get some emails answered, and, of course, always participate in the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube. Like and subscribe to the channel. It's where you can watch the show and hear us Monday through Saturday. Also, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Find Elijah at Herbal Essence. Find Justice at Justice Rhody. And, of course, mine is at Schmidt_radio. We'll hear from Matt Rhule. Pretty good presser, a lot covered. So far, so good for Nebraska. And listen, you have this new normal, a.k.a. chaos in December in the world of college football. Maybe it'll be a little less psychotic next December when you have revenue sharing and contracts. But for the here and now, you've got a storm to weather if you're a head football coach. That storm being portal departures, portal acquisitions, signing day itself, holding on to a class, holding on to key pieces in that class, and, oh yeah, the good old staff movement. A little bit more clarity on Coach Potroast, Terrence Knighton saying fare thee well on social media. Wish him the best. He was dynamic. There's been no portal hand grenade or hand grenades as of yet with Nebraska, as that is good news after it's been a little bit heavy with the exit sign for Nebraska. So we'll get there. Nebraska able to land a top 20 class to most of the services, 21 and 24/7 Sports. And right now, fellas, they are 6th in the Big Ten. Nebraska's always recruited well. It's time for that number next to the class to start matching what they do on the field. They've always been in the thick of it with resources and the ability to identify some kids and then get the kids to sign the letter of intent. But it is more important than ever to get that immediate impact. Do you supplement in the portal? Yeah. Do you get guys to stick around and get good or come in good? Yeah, you need that. But the reality is this: there's going to be more of a Coach Prime feel. He said this a couple of months ago, where their philosophy was to bring Louis and flip the roster. Matt Rhule didn't want to be the bad guy and start making cuts and running kids off, and I appreciate that. But now you have a gun to your head thanks to the NCAA with a 105 roster, and you're going to need to keep whittling. Unfortunately, that's attrition. And all that being said is you need the high school guys to be good enough and ready to come in and contribute, or be able to, as he said, be part of this two-pronged approach. You've got your two deep, and then you've got your developmental side of the football. So if you're not ready to come in and perform, go get good, get into the lab, Elijah, and grow your skills. And if you don't like it, you'll get gone, and they'll replace you with somebody in the portal. So that's the way of doing business here in college football as we get close to 2025.
Well, I know there's the difference between Coach Prime and Matt Rhule, their style, what they want to do. I mean, it's night and day. But I think Deion Sanders, you talked about the press conference, I think it was roughly a month ago, where he talked about his philosophy with bringing in high school kids, and it was,
I need 10 guys that can come play.
That's exactly what he said. He said, I'm not looking for guys that are going to sit here in redshirt. He did the math on, he's like, essentially 50% of your recruiting class within the first year and a half that they're on campus will transfer, or God forbid, a season-ending injury, career-ending injury, whatever it may be. Half is what his number was. So he's like, if I bring in 22 guys, half of them are going to be gone in 18 months, leaves me with 11. Let's say half of those guys redshirted for a year and they weren't on the field. I'm getting production out of 5 guys. He's like, I could either have those 22 guys that I bring in a recruiting class, which you get production out of a couple, or I could go find proven guys in the portal. That's his philosophy. It's definitely different than Matt Rhule's, but we're going to start seeing that shift a little bit more where, you know what, the reality of the situation is with the 105 roster limit, you don't have space on your roster to have 15 to 20 guys in your recruiting class redshirt for an entire year and not be productive. Matt Rhule still wants guys that redshirt, but the simple fact of the matter is if half of those guys are going to be gone in 18 months, which we're kind of seeing the results of that with Nebraska's transfer portal departures within the past week, it doesn't make sense to bring in big recruiting classes and have guys sit in redshirt and then never see the field for you. So I think the healthy middle ground is probably the right answer between where Deion Sanders is at and where Matt Rhule's at. But it's interesting to see how the Matt Rhule style is kind of shifting a little bit more towards Deion Sanders after what's happened in his first 2 years on the job.
You can't wait. You can't wait anymore in college football because you have the opportunity to win now, and then your job is to sustain it. Have a breakthrough season where you're 8, 9, 10 wins. Maybe you're knocking on the playoff door, and then go do it again. Right now with Nebraska, it's I think it's understood. Like your lines of scrimmage, okay, that's going to be some more lab time. More times than not, unless you get some super high-profile guys, they're going to take some more seasoning on the lines of scrimmage. Maybe not. Maybe you get a dude to play left tackle for you out of high school. I mean, it's been done. Colorado's left tackle, sorry to go Buff reference here twice in one segment, let alone the first segment, but their left tackle, I think it's Seaton, that kid has been pretty good, and he's been all right. Bama's had a handful of guys that have played offensive line as freshmen or redshirt freshmen, but that's more the exception than the rule. The rule now, no pun intended, is going to be the guys come in. And I think they feel pretty good about guys in this class that can come in and contribute. Let's go there. And I think we're all excited about Dawson Merritt, right? Big-time ball player, a high-profile recruit, a kid you got away from Alabama, and Rhule pretty much raved about him. We'll hear from Rhule on Merritt here in just a moment. Cortez Mills, you get that flip in the mother of all okie dokes on signing day. Wasn't quite the hat dance, but it was the wardrobe change from OU. It was pretty funny. Mitch Sherman tweeted this out about how Cortez had the Oklahoma shirt on, said something doesn't fit right, and he rips the polo off and puts on the Nebraska sweatshirt. I think that's good. I like TJ Lateef a lot. Nebraska will have to think hard about what they want to do at quarterback with Dillon, and then what if Harburg is going to try and hone his skills at a skill spot versus the backup quarterback spot. And then, Rhule's on the horn, making his way down to the press conference, making sure Jeremiah Jones is going to stick and stay. So Missouri came in late, Nebraska hung on, and Jones is that hybrid dude you want on defense, because it was pretty clear today, too, that Nebraska isn't going to shift what they want to do defensively. That was some question. Would Nebraska morph more towards a 4-3? Would they go a different direction now that Tony White has gone to Florida State? Matt Rhule made it clear 3 times today, mentioning that he likes the 3-3-5, likes the style of defense. You can always tweak here and there, but you've recruited now for 2 years to this system. You can't really do an about face because you've got puzzle pieces that match, guys, what he wants to do on defense, what you have already on campus.
And that's where my mind went. Matt Rhule kind of shot this down. Maybe we'll hear from him here in just a second. Whenever I looked at, you talked about the puzzle pieces you've recruited to, But then I also turned around and it was like a lot of those puzzle pieces that fit your 3-5. Specifically, I look at like the 3-3-5 or there's 3-man front pass rushers. The guys that, your Von Miller types, they can be a little bit lighter. Their forte isn't necessarily against the run. You have to be solid there, but that's not why you're on the field.
You can't be ran at for 8 consecutive plays on an 8-play, 80-yard drive.
Yeah, but I saw some of those guys heading out the door. When you look at Prince Will and James Williams and Jamari Butler, the guys that are a little bit lighter than your prototypical 4-3 defensive ends, I saw them going out, and it had my wheels spinning in terms of, are they going stylistic change this offseason, or are they just fully committing to going maybe towards a 4-3? Matt Rhule kind of shot that down today. I thought that was interesting because now it does leave you a little bit light with some of those 3-3-5 type pass rushers. I do think you saw a lot from Willis McGahee this year to think that he can step into that jack position role and be good next year. That was also something Brunsey mentioned yesterday with Prince Will kind of losing some snaps to Willis McGahee as the year went on. So you still have pieces there, but I did think it was interesting that Matt Rhule kind of doubled down at the press conference today and said, no, the 3-3-5 is what we are, and that's what we're going to be moving forward.
So let's hear from Matt Rhule, Mike Babcock here in a little less than 10 minutes. But specifically here, when it comes to portal usage and adapting, cut 6 here from Matt Rhule. You signed 20 kids that he really likes. He really likes the mentality and athleticism of this class. But you're also going to now supplement in the portal, and you're going to kind of mesh both of them together to put together a really good roster.
Portal, I know everyone's kind of flipping out a little bit right now. I try to prepare everybody. Even with the signing class we have today, even with the kids in the portal, we're still over 85 scholarship. There's going to be more. Everybody's journey is different. Jamari came in to see me first thing Monday morning. We hugged. I never expected Jamari to be back next year. Then he came to me and said he wanted to come back and play. I thought he was going to go to the NFL. He's going to do what he has to do. Everyone's got a little different story. Some guys, this is just a different age. Everyone comes in now, am I going to start? Am I going to play? And I think you guys know me well enough to know I'm not going to tell everybody what they want to hear. I'm going to tell them the truth. And some guys will stay, some guys will go. A lot of people want to come here right now. We're getting a lot of calls. It'll all be fine. It'll all be great. As I look at where we're at right now, everything that's happening is by design. My history has always been to be 6-6 in the second year, get to a bowl game, and the third year make a jump, and we'll make that jump. I'm adapting to the new landscape. When I first got here, you could only transfer once. Now you can transfer twice in a year. We'll adapt. We'll have good players, and we'll play good football.
So there was calm. There was calm again in this storm, but some new ink for Nebraska today. Elijah, who do you like? The obvious is Dawson Merritt. You've got a kid in Jeremiah that is really talented, and the primary recruiter was Tony White. So for Nebraska to keep him was big. But maybe it's an easy take, but I'm pretty fired up about Mills with his ball skills, his speed. And to be quite frank, Florida kids are athletically gifted. They play against high-level competition. Florida kids are tough. And I like all of that combination here moving forward for somebody that's had spring football for a lot of his high school career, played against high-level competition, and is somebody that is prone to come in and contribute. And he'll have Dana Holgerson getting the lab going to try and find him the football. Do you curve Parker? Do you like Parker out of St. Louis, the running back?
I love Jamarian Parker, the running back. I do think, though, that you've found a guy in Emmett Johnson that's probably going to be your bell cow next season. So I know after everything we said to lead off about how you need to find guys that are going to contribute earlier rather than later, I think Parker's a guy
Still
that
lean on the vets.
You find some places for him next year, maybe special teams, but I think that might be a bit more of a project piece with Jamarian Parker. I still do like him. A guy I think might surprise, especially considering he's along the lines of scrimmage and play early, is Malcolm Simpson. Yeah. I love the athleticism.
They really think he can come in and help.
The athleticism that he has along the lines of scrimmage, I think, can kind of microwave his process to getting on the field because he is a special type of athlete on the defensive line. Really like the film I've seen from him. Jeremiah Jones as well. He's kind of unique with that size and speed combination. You saw how important that was to Matt Rhule whenever he led off with it in the press conference, making sure they kept Jeremiah Jones in this class. The suitors were coming for him hot and heavy late in the process. I think he's also a guy that can get on the field earlier rather than later defensively with what Nebraska wants to be in that secondary. Also, considering there's a role I think he could fill early in his career with Isaac Gifford moving on. I think that's a place where he could slot in pretty seamlessly early in the career. So I like him as well.
Yep, get the defense down. Justice, who do you like?
Lawrence just phoned in and asked the question. So Nebraska trying to hire DeKeel Shorts, the wide receiver coach at Kentucky, and DeJarian Miller, who conveniently plays high school ball with Jamarian Parker, has not signed his letter of intent with Kentucky. So Lawrence wanted to ask the question if Shorts gets hired, does he bring DeJarian Miller and Berrien Brown with him from Kentucky?
They were working on Miller. I know that. Right now it's 20. The door's probably still open, but with Miller, he was going to stay at Kentucky with Shorts. Shorts is here in Lincoln, of course. So does he look elsewhere in the SEC is the question, a little closer to home. But never say never. Let's get our starting 5 shout-outs and always participate here. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, like and subscribe. The other Dave was first. Good to have you. Uncle Larry is in. Loose Lips says Nebraska wins again. Jay is here. Cliff's in from Florida. Justin, good to have you. NASCAR Eric. Mike in Cali. Mr. Snitley is here. Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Saying, look, let's get some difference makers from the portal. Wrestling Oranges is here. Tuck checks in. Arlo is here. Mike Babcock is next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. We'll get more of your stream comments. Anonymous checking in. Arlo Jr. is here. Is it signing day for 2025's Class 20? Players on their way to Lincoln for their Big Red career. Mike Babcock with us, Mr. Husker Football from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Babbers, what you think? What you think of all the chaos that's ongoing and Nebraska still able to land a top 20 class?
Well, again, I think that Justice did a good job of calling the women's basketball game last night.
I love that.
2 very enthusiastic thumbs up.
Thank you, sir.
Signing day is always there's always a lot of excitement, right? And for me, I'm just an old guy. I want to see him get here and get on the field and see what happens. You know, it's great to have 4 stars after your name, and it's great to have, you know, all the attention and so forth. And I know that the coaches are getting what they're looking for when they make offers to these players, but I want to see them when they get on the field. I mean, it's exciting, you know, Cortez Mills, Jeremiah Jones, you know, receivers. I was disappointed to see Malachi Coleman indicate that he was going to go into the transfer portal. So, you know, let's get some young receivers in here that can step in, because I really thought he was going to be a significant aspect for the Nebraska offense. But for me, that's the thing is, they've got a good reputation. You bring them in, you meet the needs that you have. Let's see if they can get it done on the field.
News on social media as we talk. Mike Babcock with us. Kai Wallen is off to the portal. Nebraska's defensive lineman and interior guy that got some reserve snaps. But that kind of leads us to the other part of this equation with portal, with signing day, with coaching transition. Of course, Coach Knighton will be elsewhere, and Tony White is at Florida State. What a way to earn your paycheck this week if you're Matt Rhule.
Yeah, there's no question, and it's not gonna change. He has to change his approach. You know, he talked about when he came here, he was told that they wanted him to have a developmental program. I think you're speaking in terms of what Tom Osborne used to do. But you can't really do that now. I mean, you get players, they come in here, they need to play. If they don't play, chances are they're going to consider going into the portal. And I think you have to adjust as a coach. And I think that was one of the indications that we got from Matt Rhule at the news conference today, was that he's kind of changing his approach a little bit. He has to. That's the nature of the beast.
Mike, that adjustment being go get guys out of high school that can play right away. I mean, don't hope, hope, I guess, but have a good feeling that from a physicality, body type, skill level, that you just got to go get better dudes that are at a higher level coming out of high school if you're going to turn to them. And there'll be that partial development or seasoning, but that's the ask right now. You're getting paid. You're getting revenue sharing in the future. You're getting NIL. If you're going to turn to an 18 or 19-year-old, they better be ready to go.
Yeah, I think you used the word earlier, didn't you? Chaos. I mean, it's kind of where we are right now. Yeah. And get recruits, incoming freshmen that can play right away. I think you also have to consider the transfer portal. You have to go that way. I think that Holgerson spoke this morning on with the Husker Network and said something to the effect that they were going to bring in to look at 20 to 30 guys in the transfer portal. They weren't going to take that many, but they were going to bring them in and take a look or whatever. And I think that that's one of the things that you have to do too. This is a good thing. Signing day. This is seeing these guys come in, but also in a few days, the transfer portal opens up, and what's going to happen there, because we're seeing guys at Nebraska that are committing, that are saying that they're going to go into the portal, and you've got to be able to replace those guys, because those are people that were going to fit into the system.
Yeah, Mike, whenever you talk about the transfer portal departures, first off, I think Kai Wallen's a big one. I think we'll probably get back into this one. I really liked how he played as the year went on this year.
Came in and performed.
His limited snaps, but really enjoyed watching him play. I think that's a tough loss, and maybe at least how I'd forecast it, the biggest one with how many years he still had left so far that we've seen go into the portal along that defensive line. But you see a lot of Husker fans in our chat right now saying, man, is Nebraska going to have a defensive line for the bowl game? Are they going to play a 1-5-5 in the bowl game? I thought that was pretty funny. But that's simply put, it's a reality of college football that Husker fans haven't had to deal with because they haven't been playing in a bowl game. But it's something a lot of other teams have dealt with over the past 4 or 5 years as you have opt-outs and guys entering the transfer portal. It's just where college football is at right now. And I think it's the adjustment for Nebraska fans because you haven't been playing in a bowl game to understand, a lot of guys that played good snaps for your team are going to be out and they're not going to play in a bowl game.
Yeah, well, Pritzwell, I can't pronounce his last name.
Uman Yellen.
Yeah, neither can we.
Yellen. Okay, right. He's indicated he's going into the transfer portal, right? James Williams going into the transfer portal. Jamari Butler was going to come back to Nebraska, and now he's going to go in the portal, although last year he did the same thing and then came back. You can change your mind. That's okay. But, that's an area that, and you're going to lose Ty Robinson and Nash Huntmaker. You've got to have some guys that come in there and can step in and play right away and fill in gaps that have been left by the transfer portal and graduation.
Mike, what's the biggest hang up from your years of seeing college football, specifically Nebraska, that what's the difference with when a Broderick Thomas came in or a Tommy Frazier came in and they played, Steve Taylor, they played. But again, they're more the exception than the rule, and now it's going to be the rule moving forward.
Well, yeah, it was, under Osborne, it was very much developmental, and particularly in the offensive line. You didn't see guys play immediately.
Will Shields, really, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, you expected to, and they got reps in practice when they came in here, but you expected those offensive linemen typically had been here 3 years before they got on the field, and they're going against teams like Kansas always played young guys. They didn't have that kind of development approach that Nebraska did. and you got young guys going against guys that have been in a program for 3 years or more, mature guys in that offensive line. Nebraska had some great lines, the pipeline. That was part of what happened is those guys developed. They were here and they worked hard on the scout squad during practice or whatever, and development was a big thing. Now you can't do that because it's not going to work. Guys are not going to stick around, for one thing, and for another thing, the roster size now is not going to allow you to have a bunch of walk-ons come in here. And, in many cases, the walk-ons stuck around, developed, and got themselves on the field. You're not going to have as many of those guys because you can't. It's difficult to bring in walk-ons when you've got 105 limit and you've got the number of scholarships players, you've got NIL, you've got guys that can get paid in other ways, whether they have a scholarship or not. It's just a different kind of a thing.
Mike, when you talk about this being a young program and Nebraska trying to be a developmental program, do you believe that this bowl game and these 15 extra practices will help streamline the maturity and the development of some of these younger players with these extra practices?
Oh, to me, that's always been a key element of getting to a bowl game, is you get extra practices. It always seemed unfair to me to some extent. The teams that didn't get to bowls, they need the extra practice. They give them a chance, but they didn't get it. It's the teams that go to the bowl games, you get the extra practice. I think that's really important. That's probably the biggest thing, unless you're in a situation where you're in the playoffs, then you're trying to make a run for a national title or whatever. It's a little bit different kind of a situation, but for most teams, getting into a bowl game, I think, means being able to get those extra practices to get those younger guys a chance to see what's going to happen. Then sometimes you have the older guys that say, hey, I'm going into the NFL draft. I'm not going to play in a bowl game. Don't like to see that, but that's, I understand why they do it.
Mike, a thought here moving forward as we wind it down with Tony White's departure, Terrence Knighton's departure, the addition of Holgerson, just the coaching staff shakeup here. Rhule seems pretty confident, not only in sticking with the 3-3-5, but finding the next really high-level defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I was surprised when he said he was going to stay with the 3-3-5. I thought that was maybe one thing that was going to change when Tony White indicated he was going to Florida State. But apparently that's not going to be the case. They're going to stay with it. That's a good thing. Potentially, John Butler could end up being the guy. It sounds like he's going to do it for the bowl game. But it's very important, and I hated to see Tony White go because I thought he was a really significant element of that staff. And Terrence Knighton the same way, a very popular assistant coach as well as a very good one. So it's like everything else, like players going. You got to deal with players transferring out. You got to deal with coaches changing. It's, again, chaos is the word that you use, and I think that applies in both in the coaching staffs and in the players.
Mike, what's coming up from you with Hail Varsity, bud?
I just wrote a little bit about that. The chaos of the of where we're at, and how different it is now from when it was a time when you would develop players, and that was kind of the approach, and that set Nebraska apart in a lot of ways. And it was a significant element of why Nebraska was so successful under Tom Ott.
It's all accelerated. Babbers will holler again. Thank you for the time, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys.
There he is, Mike Babcock with us. Open phones here till 5 with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody, 489-1240 to get in. So, what's going on staff-wise? We'll get Mike Schaefer's take on the class. Also, Evan Bland Let's hear from Matt Rhule a little bit more, and some things to clean up since the Iowa game. The handshake, the departure of White, Dana, pot roast, Garrett, Sat is back. That was asked towards the tail end of the press conference. Do you go quarterback looking in the portal? And we'll get Rhule's take on some of these specific guys. He was asked about Dawson Merritt, his fit. Of course, Simpson, the defensive lineman, Lateef. But Rhule, did address the handshake fiasco with Iowa. And that's cut to. Here is Coach Rhule. Before
I move forward, I just want to say one thing about the Iowa game. And, obviously our players didn't shake hands before the game. Captains, I didn't know that even after the game. I found out about it, afterwards. That's not what we want to do. That's not the right way to handle it. I do want to say we showed up at the game, and really for 12 years now, we show up to an away game. We always kind of go to the 50-yard line. Some guys, will say a prayer for safety. Some guys will just break it down. We've never really had any problems. We had a problem last year at Colorado for a few minutes. We had a problem this year at USC, but for the most part, we kind of go and do it. Iowa didn't want us to do it before the game. They told us we had to go to the end zone. When we came out to walk to the end zone, there were 7 armed state troopers standing on the logo. I think our players felt some type of way about police in pregame. They felt that wasn't maybe channeled the right way, but I do. We've got great guys. We've got great leadership. Not the right decision, not what we wanted. But I think when you watch that game, credit to both teams. Between the lines, no unsportsmanlike fouls, no trash talking, no taunting, and watching college football. Even after the game, I think both teams handled themselves in a way that a lot of games didn't. So we'll grow from that. We'll learn from that. But I know a lot of people have asked me about it. I do want to make sure everyone understands kind of the whys. Why our guys maybe felt that way. But again, we'll be better. And we'll make sure our guys understand that we'll always shake everyone's hand before we play them and after, regardless of the score.
Well put, addressed, and a little bit of the why, as Matt Rhule put it. He was unaware. It happened. Won't happen again.
Quickly, do you have a problem with Iowa putting uniformed police officers on the 50? Because I don't.
I think it's absolutely overkill.
It's overkill, but there was a scuffle pregame against USC.
Sure.
There's a scuffle pregame last year against Colorado.
Sure.
I understand you as Iowa. But first off, let's be clear, there's probably a little bit of mind games in there from Iowa. Say, let's not go let them pray on the 50. But also, from a safety point of view, I understand saying, let's get out in front of this and prevent an issue before it could happen.
Let me ask you this, though. If you put some yellow coats that are in their 70s or 80s around the midfield logo, I don't think you have the type of team that's going to move Grandpa out of the way to pray. Do you have to put armed guards around your logo?
That's a fair point.
That's kind of my thought. Like if you can't come here, they would have adhered, okay? when Grandpa Simpson there, but that is that could have worked too.
But I guess I also don't blame Iowa for wanting to get out in front of a potential scuffle pregame because you've seen it before. Trying to avoid the Ohio State-Michigan midfield situation.
Nebraska gets there early enough, though. I mean, a lot of times, at least some of the still pics we've seen, QB1A says just wants Clausburn there to lead the pregame prayer. That would be great. That would be hilarious. How about Tony White's departure? That came as not a shock that he was leaving after year 2, but of course the move to Florida State. Coach Rhule addressed that.
Obviously, staff-wise, we have some things going on right now. Tony White, I can't thank him enough for his 2 years. I thought he did a good job. Tony came to me on Sunday and just said, hey, for some family reasons, wanted to get his family back, back home to Florida. Obviously, I was disappointed. I liked coaching with Tony. I liked being around him. I thought he had a great affect. But, he's got to go do what he's got to do. As I told the team, I've had 2 defensive coordinators in 12 years as a head coach. Both guys, while they were with me, were Broyles Award finalists. The next defensive coordinator will be a great defensive coordinator. We will play defense.
So that's the rundown there as far as getting Dana to stay. Coach Knighton, Garrett, what are their futures? Cut 5.
I was ecstatic when Dana decided to to stick around. He decided that he saw enough here in his time here to know that over the course of 4 weeks that we can get this thing offensively to where we want to get it to. And so we'll find the right defensive coordinator. I know there's a lot of angst from our guys right now about, hey, what's it going to be? The defense isn't going to change, but the offense is going to be better. We have some assistant coaches. People have asked me about Terrence and Garrett. They're both with us. They both have some opportunities, and that's this time of year. Whereas a lot of staffs hide it. I've told every recruit, hey, this is out there and this could happen, because I don't want to lie to kids. I'm not going to lie to players. So in the coming days we'll see where they end up. If it's here, great. But I'll be straight up with you. I think that some of those guys they might take some other opportunities. And when you're a coach and you have a bunch of players coaching for former players of yours coaching for you, to me there comes a time when for them it's time for them to kind of go spread their wings. They played for me. They want to go coach somewhere else and be under someone else's guidance. When I see Syracuse, I see Fran Brown, the head coach. He had the same conversation with me at some point. So I'm grateful for them if they're here, not here. We've hired Coach Shorts to come in and coach the receivers even before this. The initial plan was to have both he and Garrett there. Dana's offense, they've always kind of had an inside and outside receivers coach. It was Dana's only request. After 4 weeks, he said, Matt, I love the entire staff. I like working with Glenn. I like working with Sad. I like working with Donnie. I like working with EJ. But I do want to bring in my guy that I trust and believe in. He's one of the best recruiters. Great coach who kind of knows our system. So we made that, and then we'll see what happens as a result.
So it's kind of status quo. We'll see if there's some movements. I know Rhule just said that Dana's all good with the offensive staff. We'll see how long that holds.
We had talked plenty this season about finding an actual on-field role for Jamar Mosey, which we haven't really had any clarity there where that goes, but we had heard plenty about that of finding a way to get him involved in an on-field coaching role. What does that look like? We don't really know right now, but that's kind of the one, I guess, big question that remains with the offensive staff for me is where does Jamar Mosey fit in? Because we were under the assumption that he was going to find an on-field role for the 2025 season.
And we'll ask Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7, about that, kind of his projections. And so when it comes to Nebraska, and we've heard Rhule talk about the portal, we've heard him talk about the assistants. Now, how about just how difficult it was to keep guys on board with all the smoke around the defensive coordinator moving on, your defensive line coach moving on? What was this signing day process like to get the 20 dudes in the boat? Cut number 9 here from Matt Rhule.
I think people were excited about Dana. I think a lot of those guys had relationships with the coaches on the staff, and a lot of that hasn't changed. I think obviously the Tony thing kind of scared people. I think Terrence's name being out there scared people. And I say this with the greatest respect. We're going to be a defensive team. We're going to play defense. Like, Terrence is my 5th defensive line coach that I've had as a head coach. And, Hassan Reddick was a first-round draft pick. Brian Burns, had a great career. I mean, we've had great players up and down the board. So I love those guys. I'm not saying anything to take away from it, but, we're going to play great defense. And we're going to have great defensive players who go on and get drafted. I think that message to people, stability. I mean, again, this is how we do things. Just come play for us. And I think the relationships that our recruits and families have with the whole staff, from Susan Elza to Corey Campbell, from Kristen Coggan to Ron Brown to just Gus Felder, across the whole gamut, I think make them feel good about kind of what will happen here.
We'll wind down this first hour. 489-1240. More comments in the stream. Hail Varsity Signing Day 2025. You can find us Hail Varsity YouTube channel.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, the signing day special at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. Podcast, search Hail Varsity Radio. Like and subscribe. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. We appreciate the feedback. Hail Varsity YouTube, 10-minute mark. We'll check in with the bearded guru, Mike Schaefer, with Husker 24/7 Sports. Evan Bland, next hour as well. A little bit more from Matt Rhule as we wind down this first hour. Plenty on staff changes, plenty on recruiting, and some of the players will sneak in next hour as well when it comes to his comments. But a question that was asked to Matt Rhule, one, the timeline of the defensive coordinator, really no timeline. You just got to get it right. Just paraphrasing a little bit, but in this new world, right, when chaos is very real in December, how does the 105 cap affect how you recruit? And more from Rhule here on that need for instant impact out of the high school ranks.
I think the way we look at it is when we did this, I just completely flipped over back into like what we did in the NFL, where you have a 53-man roster, you have maybe 6 wideouts, maybe you have 9 linemen, and these are the guys you play with, right? And so then you have like another 53-man roster that's like your developmental. So that comes out to 106, basically, and you basically have two 53-man rosters in our mind, right? And so these guys are playing, the guys who play, the resources, these other guys, they're coming, they're getting an education, they're developmental player. The high school players that we sign, we were very blessed when we got here. There were a lot of older guys on defense. The young guys that we sign on defense, either we signed last year or that we signed this year, when they come in, we're going to hope that they play. If not, they kind of go over here, they're on the developmental group, and then in a couple of years, they'll be John Bullock, they'll be those guys. So we'll try to take a 2-pronged approach, sort of, hey, developmental guys and then guys that are ready to play right now, and whichever way we have to go with each kid, we'll go, and we'll be honest with them, and if they want to go through the process of turning themselves into a great player over time, then do it. If they want to kind of, hey, it's either hit or miss, then we have to do that as well.
Let's sneak in cut 19. Rhule was asked, are you comfortable in this new world of college football?
Yeah, it doesn't mean I necessarily like it, right? But I also didn't like I really hated going from 150 to. I've had kids come in my office saying like in the last couple of days and hug me and be like, "Hey, I know there's no spot for me here, coach. Is there anywhere you can?" I've had parents text me and say, "Coach, my son's a walk-on. We don't have any connections. Can you help us with anything?" We got Sean Patton there making tapes for kids. I hate that. I told the players regarding Tony, but also them, I just, when they make a decision, whether it's to stay, to leave, whatever they decide, I hope that they make the right decision for them based on the right reasons and the right information. And I hope they do it the right way. I made a decision to come here. I made a decision to leave Temple. We all make different decisions. And I just want them to make the best decision with the best information. It's unique in that, we're talking to players about, hey, why weren't you at study hall yesterday? And School B could be talking to them about, hey, if you come here, we're going to start, we're going to give you this. But at the same time, we have the ability to do that too. So am I comfortable with it? I'm going to flourish in it. To me, the way you're successful is you come in, you figure out what it is. I talked to a lot of other head coaches, and I think everyone's trying to figure out, the new rules and how it's all going to be done. And at least at some point there'll be some contracts, with revenue sharing, which will be nice. Yeah, I'm comfortable. Like I said before, I believe everything that's happened. And like my own kid, my son's walking around everything is exactly what was supposed to happen. I tried to tell everybody what was going to happen. No, not every. Did I want Tony to leave? No, it's okay. Coaches are going to leave. If we have good players, guys, and we have good coaches, then people are going to come try to get them. If no one's trying to take our players and no one's trying to take our coaches, it means we're in trouble. That's what it's going to be. And the thing I'm seeing is that people all over the country are saying Nebraska is one of those places with resources. So, hey, coach, I'd love to come coach there. Or, coach, I'd love to come play there.
It's Matt Rhule. Reminder to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives, prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Hour 2, Hail Varsity Radio continues. Hail Varsity YouTube channel.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Justice Rhody. We'll check in with the bearded guru, Mike Schaefer, with Husker 24/7 Sports in a moment. His take on the class, the work Nebraska has in front of him when it comes to the portal and hiring a defensive coordinator. And without further ado, we welcome in the bearded guru, Mike Schaefer, with us here on Hail Varsity Radio at Mike J. Schaefer, where you follow him on Twitter. So, true or false, Schaefer, thanks for making time on a busy day for you.
No problem.
Has the little guy thrown out at you, please respect my decision, when you're trying to correct him?
I think every time I've gone to change a diaper or to change an outfit in the last couple of weeks, he's basically tried to crawl into the transfer portal. So we're not vocalizing it yet, but just through the nature of his actions, it seems quite possible that Hudson is looking for opportunities elsewhere.
The old portal option. I love it. Want to get your thoughts on just the week that's been, and it's just Wednesday, but it feels kind of like midnight, as they say.
It's only been 3 days. That's it?
How many cups
I think
of
this
coffee?
beard was a lot smaller like 4 hours ago.
It's been one of those benders, right? You're just on vacation, and
I could use a bender.
No kid. Well, call me. We'll make that happen.
Conference championship Saturday is right around the corner.
Yeah. We've done that before.
Yeah, just across the street.
I don't think it still exists anymore.
No,
can we go drink in the parking lot?
We could, for old time's sake. We got to wear construction
hats. We sit in the back
hats.
of some used Honda and just,
You got to wear a construction hat. That's the inside joke of all inside jokes. All right, Schaefer, let's talk people in this class and just overall ready to play guys. Rhule talked about this new normal. Coach Prime talked about it as well. And guys in this class that you think that can come in and contribute. Who stands out to you?
Yeah, I think you start with wide receivers, and I anticipate that they expect Cortez Mills and Isaiah Mosey are two guys that could come in and play pretty early in their career, in part because it's a relatively unsettled position. We'll see what happens with Nebraska in the transfer portal. I believe his name is Dane Key, just came in from Kentucky, and I think a lot of people will be keeping an eye on that because I think Nebraska would love to get a veteran out of the portal and go from there. But, Cortez Mills was such a big get because I think that he is a really talented wide receiver. I've said this in large part. I'm just parroting what I'm hearing from 24/7 Sports because I haven't been able to go physically watch him. But what stands out is, in an age where everything's about track times and multi-sport athletes, this is a guy that earned his 4-star rating by what he's done on the football field, by just being a really good wide receiver who creates separations at the top of his route, that has the hands and the physicality to go get the football, can run away from people, can jump, but isn't just an athlete. He's like a straight football player and a wide receiver at that. And I think that's a guy who can step in and play early. I mean, one of the great things of the kind of Mike Leach tree, if you will, that Dana Holgorsen is part of, is that wide receiver position throughout Mike Leach's career, throughout Dana Holgorsen, throughout Lincoln Riley. Pick any one of the Dino Babers, any of those guys who are running the air raid offense. You learn that pretty quickly as a wide receiver because the route concepts it's not like a really deep offense. It's a little bit different than what Marcus Satterfield was putting together. And so the simplicity of it should allow guys like Cortez Mills, who's an early enrollee, and Isaiah Mosey, an early enrollee, to be able to play. I look at a Jamarian Parker, the running back out of St. Louis. I think that's a guy that could have an opportunity early in his career. I think Connor Booth, he's unfortunately injured. But Nebraska didn't just bring him in to sit around and wait for an opportunity. That's a guy that they really like. I mean, here, the amount of people in my industry that have asked if they're going to play him on defense. And it's like, no,
he's a back.
He's a running back. I know he doesn't, I know running backs coming from Wahoo aren't exactly a thing in the college football world, but that's what Nebraska is going to do with Connor Booth. I think he's a guy that could play early. I hesitate with the linebackers and Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones because I think that's a position, we thought Vincent Shavers was going to play this year, and he did, but I don't think he played as much as maybe people anticipated. I think that's a tougher spot to come in as a freshman, even as an early enrollee. And Vincent Shavers did everything right, and now he's going to have a mountain of opportunity. But I think Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt, Merritt could end up as an edge player. So I think those guys are at the top of your class, but I don't know that I'm expecting them to come in and play immediately. I'm fascinated by what Jeremiah Jones is actually going to play on a football field. Seeing that guy come through the recruiting lines, and he's as big as offensive line recruits. But this is someone that can play safety, rover, linebacker, defensive end, tight end, wide receiver. What they do with Jeremiah Jones is going to be fascinating. He's another early enrollee. I mean, he's one of those guys I can't wait to see in March and April during those spring practices, because I'd have no idea what Nebraska's going to do with them. And here's the dirty secret. They don't know what they're going to do with them. I know that because I've talked to the people directly involved with it. So, I'm fascinated because this class has sort of developmental guys on one end of it, some potential early impact, but I don't see a lot of guys where it's like, oh, he could be a potential freshman All-American or he's going to get a ton of run. But you never know. You don't know how this is going to play out. I don't think I was really high on Ja'Cory Barney but I don't know that people would have expected Ja'Cory Barney to be sort of the linchpin to Nebraska's offense that he was at the end of the year. So things tend to play out and guys tend to show up. When you have 14 of your 20 signees are coming in early, I mean, people are looking for opportunity, and they're going to get a lot of opportunity in the spring to kind of show if it's worth them having the same opportunity in the fall as a freshman.
Yeah, Mike, and to your point, I think there will be opportunities that abound on that defensive side of the ball, like who comes in and plays rover. I know Ramir Stewart's there, maybe Kobe Brett's, but there's a gap you got to fill there. You look at off-ball linebackers. I was doing some research here. In terms of the guys Nebraska has still on roster returning at off-ball linebacker, you have Vincent Shavers, 8 career tackles. Then you have Gage Stanger, who only has tackles on special teams, 3 of them. You have Vincent Ginatone, who's only got 1 tackle on special teams. And then you have Noah Bustard, Dylan Rogers, and Ishmael Smith-Flores, who all have a tackle apiece defensively in mop-up duty against UTEP. Like, there is definitely opportunity for guys to step in and play early at that linebacker spot.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that Nebraska is going to be seeking some guys in the transfer portal that maybe don't have a lot more experience in that, but have some that you can kind of mix and match. And so, yeah, I think opportunity is going to be the key word for 2025. I look at the transition of the 2024 season where you have this veteran group and guys that have been here a long time, and I look at the juxtaposition of what 2025 is going to look like, and it feels like a rebuilding year. And I anticipate that some of their growing pains are going to be early in the season as guys are going to be put and stressed in ways, that they haven't been. But we have plenty of time to dive into Nebraska being stressed in 2025. So I would imagine you'd rather keep it more to the signing day.
We will do that. Mike Schaefer is with us, Husker 24/7 Sports, at Mike J. Schaefer on Twitter, where you follow him. Him and, of course, Brunsey and BC with the Hypecast. You got to check out when you download your podcasts. So you answered the question about early playing time, early opportunity for some, that developmental phase. What do you think of just the portal right now with Nebraska? And do you anticipate any more moments in the portal? And you know where the Nebraska fan base is at right now with Tony White leaving, Knighton leaving, the concern about the defensive line being completely raided. Kai Wallen is in the portal. What's your panic level? What DEFCON would you be at right now with the official news of both those guys moving on?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty low relative to what it could be. I mean, there's certain names that if they go into the portal, we're talking about full-fledged panic throughout the city of Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
So until we get to that point, I don't know that we're there yet. I mean, what Nebraska has had go in the portal have been some pretty steady defensive players on a team that had just has won 6 games. So I think sometimes it fascinates me because you get it on both ends of it. Nebraska's not good enough. They don't have enough talent. And then a couple guys go into the portal and it's, oh my God, look at all the talent that they're losing. So and I don't want to take away from any of the guys that have gone in, but to me, James Williams is probably the biggest loss. And you're talking about a niche piece that, I think is a very good pass rusher, but in the Big Ten, you can't play him, against certain teams in running situations. He's just, unless he really bulks up or really sort of changes, he's not a 3, what is it? 3
down. He's not a 3 down guy.
And so he's a specialty player, and he's almost a luxury in that regard. And I don't want to take away from any of these guys because I think the world of Jamari Butler and Mekhi Bayer. They play their asses off, and I hope the best for them. But I just don't know, given some of the reaction, I think it has more to do with, Tony White is gone and Terrence Knighton is gone. But there are some guys that are on this roster that if they go in, it would really hurt. And I don't think we've reached that level yet. So I don't know how the DEFCON scale goes, but put me for a 2 if that's on the lower end of things.
2 is really, really, really bad, apparently. The higher, the less.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying.
Can we do colors?
8?
Is
it going to be like the beach where we know what the flag is based on the wind and the tides? Can we do something like that?
We're not talking flags this week.
Yeah, it's
because
not high tide yet.
No, it is not. Mike Schaefer's with us here. So let's spend a minute here on some of the offensive folks. You touched on Parker and Booth and Mills, but let's look at the big picture with Dana Holgorsen as he's on board for 2 years, Schaefer, and just kind of his rep with recruits and just how far that can go. It's been a defensive football team for 2 years. That's how they've won games. Now you flip it around, and it's going to be probably a little more upside. Hedge your bets on the offense being maybe doing more of the heavy lifting next season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly see how that plays out. I mean, they're going to have to do better than they did this year in terms of putting points up. And I think we saw in the 3 games. I mean, if you were to just section off the 3 conference games, the first 3, the middle 3, and the last 3, they actually scored their most points in the final 3, even with the 10-point performance against Iowa. It obviously helped to put up 44 against Wisconsin, but I mean, they clearly have something there. I think a full year of Dana Holgorsen would be a welcome thing for a Nebraska offense that kind of too often felt like it was stuck in the mud during conference play. I think there's a lot of intriguing players already on the roster. I'm excited to see what a Carter Nelson looks like in this offense. I don't really think he's going to go play tight end because I think they're going to have a different style for that type of position. So what can you do with a Carter Nelson that's really a wide receiver? He's a guy that he didn't redshirt this past year, and I think he got really valuable experience. But you know somebody like that wants more than what he got out of 2024. And so what does that sort of look like in 2025? What is a Dana Holgorsen offense that, has created multiple Bolitnikoff winners? What does that kind of look like? I mean, so the thing about Dana Holgorsen that's fascinating to me is we always get caught up in the passing game. And then you go back and you look at 2010 Oklahoma State, or you look at some of these teams at West Virginia. I mean, they run the ball really well, too. There's nothing he loves more than getting a defense all worried about the pass and then slipping in an easy 8-yard gainer for his running back or somebody ripping it off. So there's a lot, I think, to be excited about. I think, some of these, if we're talking about some of the players that they signed today, like I said, I mean, you look at the skill guys, it's really interesting. But if you go beyond that, I like what they did on the offensive line. I think Sean Hammerbeck is a really intriguing player down the road. I think Juju Marks was a guy that I saw at camp as a defensive lineman, and I was pretty unimpressed. And then someone got in his ear and was like, hey, have you considered the other side of the ball? And suddenly you have a really athletic offensive tackle prospect there. Brian Tapu, same thing. Houston Kahina-Torres, really good lineman, interior lineman coming from Hawaii that could be a center for Nebraska down the line. I mean, so we can talk about the skill guys and what they could bring early, but I actually think Nebraska really did a nice job adding to its offensive line room that I think is going to have a fresh outlook kind of going forward. I think some of Nebraska in 2025 is moving beyond the players that have been here for 5 or 6 years and some guys getting some new opportunity.
Schaefer, want to wind it down with this. Mike Schaefer with his Husker 24/7 Sports at Mike J. Schaefer on Twitter. Just in-state talent. You touched on Booth, but the in-state kids Nebraska was able to keep in-state and sign for today.
Yeah, I mean, I think you, as a Nebraska fan, are pretty excited about keeping Christian Jones at home. He's a guy that I think is actually going to be a much better college player than he probably was in high school because he didn't have the same sort of flash potential. You want a guy like that to dominate, and that's not necessarily where Christian Jones was going to be as a high school player, but I think his versatility makes him a really intriguing linebacker. His ability to cover is exciting. Pierce Newberry might be the most underrated player in the class. It's unfortunate that he got hurt. He was putting together a big season for Millard North. Caden Vermoss was a vocal leader of the class, a big guy behind the scenes. He's a great athlete. He's someone that I think could right away on special teams. I want that guy as a gunner. He's going to work his tail off. So I'm excited about him. And then Tyson Terry, I mean, he's a big, strong guy that, is going to be intriguing in that defensive line. You got Jackson Carpenter, who Matt Rhule referenced his 10.5 speed. He's a legacy. He's a guy that we didn't see much of from the high school level here this year. And I'm wondering if he's going to end up being more of a special teams ace than he would be a true wide receiver. But that's a guy that, I'm intrigued by as well. I think in-state Nebraska did really well. They didn't land Chase Lofton. He's going to Florida State. But otherwise, I think they cleaned up with everything that they wanted and setting themselves going forward in 26 with some commitments already and all of that.
Shave, thank you for jumping on and talking 2025 with us. We'll holler again soon, and we'll go get a banquet beer here soon.
I like the sound of all of that. You guys have a good one.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through signing day 2025. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and we welcome in Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald. Justice is trank darted back in studio, so he is fighting the good fight here. Evan, thanks for making time today. Busy one for you. Where were you this morning, man?
Yeah, you guys got it. I've been in Kansas City all day. I was at Olathe South for Juju Marks, the offensive lineman, this morning, and then at Blue Valley High School in Overland Park for Dawson Merritt this afternoon with a little Matt Rhule press conference sandwiched in between. So it's been all over. It's been a fun day. You've been hauling through, and let's focus in on Dawson and just the fight that Nebraska was in and your interaction. You've seen the film, you've watched him, and of course Matt Rhule raved about what he can do off the edge and his ability not only to cover but also to get after the quarterback. Yeah, for sure. I mean, he had offers from all over the place, and it may very well be the first guy to flip from Alabama to Nebraska, and you just never know with recruiting. Like, it was relationships for him. Certainly Nebraska wanted him for all the reasons that you're laying out, Schmidt. I mean, his journey is interesting in the sense that he didn't really play any football at all until he was in high school, and then he kind of wanted to be a receiver, and then he was okay along the defensive line until they realized, hey, if this guy's in a sort of that Jack hybrid spot, he's just as good rushing the quarterback as he is dropping back into coverage. He's got the wingspan, the explosiveness. His dad, Dave Merritt, is the assistant coach with the Chiefs and was a standout player in his own right back in the day. So he's got the genes and he grew up with it. So you have all that, and then you just spend 5 minutes talking with him, and he's very personable, well-spoken, thoughtful. He's a sports media major who wants to get into podcasting, so maybe he'll take our jobs someday. That very well could be. But he has it all going for him right now, and Nebraska's happy, and he's at peace with where he's going, and it seems like a very mutually beneficial decision on this one.
Evan, where do you think he slots in on the defense? With the athleticism, do you think he's an edge rusher? We also talked last segment with Mike Schaefer just about the lack of returning experience that Nebraska has as an off-ball linebacker. Where do you think he's going to slot into this Husker defense? Because I think one way or another, Nebraska is going to need him to get some playing time early in his career.
Yeah, I think Nebraska is projecting him as an outside linebacker at this point, or edge rusher, however you want to define that. I think he does have the frame and the ability to maybe someday be more of a middle linebacker, potentially. So probably one of those spots, and you look at MJ Sherman's heading out, and Jamari Butler's heading out, and Prince Will Umanmielen. I think he fits in that mold somewhere, and he's very much a Matt Rhule recruit in that sense, where he's got all the measurables, physically, explosively, athletically, and you put some weight on him, put some strength, and you find a spot, and that guy's too good and too driven to not fit somewhere. So I think it'll probably be outside linebacker, edge, probably what Nebraska would call that jack spot, just because of his unique blend of explosiveness. He could put his hand on the turf and get after the quarterback, but he's also rangy enough that he can drop back and defend, potentially a tight end or certainly a receiver in the slot. So a versatile athlete. One of those guys that I always kind of like to, talk to some of these guys and try to guess who could be a team leader or a captain in a few years, and I think he's got all the intangibles also that go into that. Is there a comp for him, Evan? Does he remind you of your past Husker or somebody you've seen in college or at the next level? That's a good question. I mean, I can't think of a good name right off the top of my head, but I think he's a very good fit for what the scheme wants to be, right? I just think Nebraska's done such a good job of
finding a role for these guys who are tweeners, not in the sense of like ability, but in the sense of like maybe they're not a true defensive lineman who's going to stop the run for 40 plays a game, but they're not necessarily, just going to be a middle linebacker who can drop back or attack the run either. So like he's somewhere in the middle, and I just think Nebraska has shown that they can use guys like that creatively, and you can move them around, and that's a piece where, on a given play, you don't know if he's going to come up and stop the run or if he's going to drop back on to a pass rusher. So I think that versatility is valuable, and probably even more so in this era now moving forward where you have a 105-man roster. The more guys you have that are Swiss Army knives and can move interchangeably, the more valuable those guys are.
Now, I don't mean to go too lofty with a comparison, but Dawson Merritt, 6'3", about 220. You compare it to another guy, that kind of versatile edge rusher type. Von Miller was 6'3", 230 coming out of high school, and I don't want to go there because that's a lofty comparison.
Von
but
at 285 now?
No, he's like at 255 or somewhere in there, 260.
He's higher than that.
No, he's not.
No way?
You'd be surprised.
I swear he was 270.
No, anyway, that's just a quick one to throw out there. Not to say he is Von Miller, but the frame is similar.
That would be something, for sure.
Yeah, I've gone too lofty.
Evan, I want to get your take. Matt Rhule jumped in on the defense isn't changing. We were wondering if the defense is going to change with Tony White going to Florida State, Terrence Knighton taking off. Are you surprised that Nebraska's sticking with the 3-3-5 or not at all?
Well, the scheme's worked well for them. I mean, that's pretty objectively clear with what the Black Shirts have been able to do the last two seasons statistically. I mean, the question is, who do you get that's an expert in that scheme? It was sort of, not the mainstream sort of defense when Matt Rhule hired Tony White a couple years ago. And so if they like it and they want to stick with it, it would stand to reason that you would need somebody who has some background in that. And, as Matt Rhule said today, John Butler is an internal candidate, a possibility for that full-time job. And so he's been through a full season under Tony White and has learned some of that and contributed some of his own ideas to that. So maybe he becomes more attractive because of that season that he's had. And, I don't know. It'll be interesting. All those names that you see out there, the Ryan Walters or the Jim Leonard or Elijah Robinson, who worked with Matt Rhule previously, are all interesting in their own right. But Matt Rhule was pretty clear to say he wasn't going to make a hire that was quote unquote splashy, and he wasn't going to make a hire just to sort of soothe nerves in the short term. So again, maybe it ends up being Butler. He's going to have that experience in the next few weeks, and maybe when you see how Butler conducts practices and game plans, maybe that gives you or will give Matt Rhule a sense of what that could look like into next year. And as he said, they're going to prepare for this bowl game sort of like it is a first game of the season for a lot of these guys. So, maybe that plays into it as well. But I think he made pretty clear the hire will come when it comes. Maybe that's this week. Maybe that's next month. But it is an interesting wrinkle that they would like to keep the 3-3-5 scheme in that.
It's Evan Bland with us here, Omaha World Herald, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, to flip it around to the offensive side of the ball and to kind of get back to this class of 2025, which guys intrigue you whenever you look at what Dana Holgerson's offense could be next season? Based on what we saw over the last couple games and based on what we know about Dana, which guys on that offensive side of the ball intrigue you?
I mean, a lot of the skill players, for sure. I mean, Cortez Mills making that flip is really fascinating, and it's hard not to make sort of the Ja'Cory Barney comparisons. They're both from Florida, really high-end athletically, tons of confidence, big personalities. They've produced at the high school level, big recruiting pedigree. I mean, that's a position where obviously you're going to need somebody to come in and take the snaps that Jamal Banks and Isaiah Naor have made or have taken this year. And, that could end up being a really key flip here down the stretch. I think Jamarian Parker is another one, the running back from St. Louis. He committed pretty early in the cycle, And I think a lot of people kind of forgot about him with everything else that's gone on since he committed. But you look at his film, and he seems like he has the ability to be sort of that home run threat in the ground that Nebraska just hasn't really had a lot of this year. I mean, you look at some of the skill sets that Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdell have, and I think you roll it back with those guys. But we see it in college football every year where an impact true freshman can come in and make a difference. And, Nebraska's been searching for that guy who can make it a 3-play touchdown drive instead of a 9 or 10-play one. So I think Parker is a fascinating one. His personal story is also pretty interesting. He's gone through a lot to get to this point, but he's been pretty, at least outwardly, low maintenance in terms of his commitment to Nebraska and sticking with that. So, you look at the spots where Nebraska is trying to upgrade and find playmakers. Those are two guys that come to mind for sure.
Evan, we'll wind it down. Are you surprised Nebraska was able to keep the class together with all of the turnover?
I think it speaks to a lot of the other attractive pieces to what Nebraska's offering. I mean, just from talking with Dawson Merritt today, like he didn't expect Tony White to leave, but I think the message that he got from the Huskers and that a lot of these other recruits got was, you're not committing to a coach, you're committing to a program, to a place, to a school where you can graduate. I mean, Nebraska still has the fan support that it always has had. It still has the facilities. And I think we're seeing even more clearly now that they have the NIL resources to be competitive with some of these top schools. I mean, the Jeremiah Jones story, I think that probably played a role in him coming here. And I just think that all that other stuff shines through when there's a little bit of instability there. So I think you credit that. Maybe most of all, you credit Matt Rhule and what he's done as an individual recruiter, how he's kept, I think, a pretty steady hand amid all this stuff going on. I mean, as he said today, like, everybody's kind of freaking out with coaching changes and the roster churn, and he's just kind of like, yeah, like, this is, I expected it. It's a sign of success when people are coming after your coaches and coming after your players. So I think that sense of calm and sort of that keeping that big picture approach when, everybody's kind of looking a few feet in front of them, calmed a lot of nerves and ultimately won over a lot of pretty talented guys who are going to either flipped to Nebraska or stuck with Nebraska here in the last couple of days.
Evan, appreciate the time. Great insight, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for the time.
Sounds great, guys. Thanks.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us. Dr. Brandon, thanks for the time. How are we doing?
Hey, you bet, fellas. I'm doing great. How was Turkey Day for you guys last week?
Got all fat and happy. I may have injured my knee, but it wasn't running like Christian McCaffrey.
Your family's not a turkey trot type family?
No, we are not. It was running to the fridge or running for more Fireball. But Christian McCaffrey, the topic, he has had a dinged-up season, one of the best in the NFL. He's on IR. 6 weeks on the shelf, and it was in the blowing snow in Buffalo. Those are fun to watch, not necessarily to play in. And he planted that left foot, and the knee went no. PCL, Dr. Brandon, let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about PCL, what that stands for, posterior cruciate ligament. We talk a lot on the show about the ACL, which is kind of the sister to this. So those two main structural ligaments in the knee, they sit right in the middle. They kind of run a crossing pattern. The one in the front is called the anterior cruciate ligament. Stops that knee from translating forward, essentially. That's the one we talk about most commonly. But as you move kind of to the back of the knee, that's where the PCL is, so posterior cruciate ligament. That really stops that knee from translating shin back. If you're going to injure this, typically it's in either like a hyperextension maneuver, or really more kind of a dashboard type injury where the front of your knee or your tibia kind of slams into something, whether it be the dashboard in the car or slams down on the turf. That can cause an issue where you push that tibia or the shin backwards and it stretches out that PCL. Most of the time, these are more kind of partial injuries where you stretch it some, create some laxity, some looseness there, hurts for a little while, then gets better. Rare that you take it all the way out where you knock the whole ligament out and then you have kind of this big time chronic laxity. And that's essentially where he's at this point. It sounds like more of a sprain where he didn't knock the whole thing out, probably stretched it some. Is really more kind of what they're talking about. They've mentioned maybe more of a non-operative treatment route at this point, but we're not specific or really for sure yet exactly how bad this has been torn.
Dr. Brandon, whenever you talk about the rarity of this, I feel like whenever I hear about a PCL, it's because, well, a guy's had a multi-ligament knee injury. It's an ACL in addition to a PCL and maybe an MCL as well. Whenever you hear just this PCL injury, what does that make you think? Because I guess you talked about the rarity. Why do you think in this case it was just the PCL?
Yeah, it usually boils down to, one kind of the direction of force. So always that kind of mechanism of action. How did this injury happen? When you're dealing with those, kind of multi-ligament injuries, it's really just kind of a devastating type of injury where the whole knee just gets obviously pushed in a terrible direction it's not supposed to go in. When you have more of kind of an isolated PCL, you watch most of the tape on those, and they don't look that bad when these injuries typically occur. So it is kind of that quick kind of bump on the turf, stretched it just enough and it hurts. And sometimes you don't initially notice it, kind of hurts a little bit on the front end, and then you go to try to make that next cut, that next move, and like, hey, something doesn't feel right here. This feels really loose. And so I have seen that happen a few times where our college kids will have this injury happen on one play, kind of get up limping a little bit, but feel like they can go. And then as soon as they get into that next play and start to try to cut or move, it just doesn't feel right. Either A, it's super sharp pain. Most of the time, it just doesn't feel right. It feels unstable. You don't feel like they quite have that same control.
Dr. Brandon, he went down right away, took a step, tried to cut it back off of a pitch play. And once he put that left foot in the ground, you just kind of saw his momentum stop, and it was on snow, so the surface was not stable because this was a non-contact. Is that a common way to have this type of injury? And from a grade standpoint, with the different grades of those partial issues, when you look at the snow and the ice, I mean, that can really throw that knee ligament out of whack, I would assume.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. You start to throw that, poor surface down, and definitely, there's the potential that it would cause just kind of that awkward slide of that knee, if you will, whenever you're planting the cleats on a little bit of a slippery surface. So that's likely what happened here. And fortunately, with the way that looked, if that's truly where that injury happened, it's probably going to be more on the lower grade scale, which is good for him long term. The one thing I would question, though, is that I didn't see the play right before that. You wonder if, like, the play preceding that, if he didn't have an injury where that knee kind of really struck the turf hard, and maybe he injured it the play before this. I'm not certain, what that was, or if this is maybe the first play he had during that series. But at any rate, hopefully this is going to be more kind of low grade for him. They're sure not talking about, any other confounding injuries along with this. So hopefully it's just an isolated PCL.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us here talking Christian McCaffrey, the knee injury he suffered Sunday Night Football out in Buffalo. It was a beautiful game to watch, but not so much for Christian McCaffrey with that injury. And Dr. Brandon, whenever you look at his timetable for recovery, I saw some people on Sunday night on social media saying, man, this really looks not good, the way it was non-contact, the way he went down. People thought it could have been maybe worse than it was. Take me through just how bad this actually is whenever you look at his return to play, period. Obviously, he's on injured reserve. Doesn't look like he's going to be back this season, and that's a blow for the 49ers with them sitting at 5-7, looking to make a late season push for the playoffs. But in terms of long-term prognosis for Christian McCaffrey, assuming he has until next season to rehab and get this right, what do you think his longevity period looks like?
Yeah, I think really Elijah looks pretty good. I think his return to play is very high. In terms of this causing long-term impact, likely not. There might be some subtle kind of ability there that initially comes back and plays, but usually athletes work through that and they do really well with these. It's amazing how many of these actually are out there. There's probably some of these that the guy kind of has a little bit of mild achiness, discomfort in the knee that maybe won't even see a provider for, healthcare provider for. Then there's kind of the middle of the road, which is probably where this is, where clearly something happened, and it tends to put you in what we call that grade 2 category, where you've stretched this PCL and it has, a little bit of laxity to it, looseness to it as I push on it to the back, but it has a good end point to it, good end feel. That's predominantly where the majority of these are. In this scenario, if it's fortunately, hopefully just an isolated PCL, I think that return to play and prospect for him is very high.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Christian McCaffrey, our topic, that PCL. He's off to the injured reserve list for 6 weeks, and fantasy owners are not happy. Christian's clearly not happy. Dr. Brandon, just what are some of the treatments for now as far as just dealing with some of the discomfort that McCaffrey is going to be adhering to? What will he kind of turn to here just for the here and now to heal up?
Yeah, depending on obviously the grade of this injury, there'll be a period of rest here for that first kind of 7 to 14 days. We'll oftentimes, if it's a high enough degree of a sprain, we'll brace them in what we call a little bit of flexion, so you're not putting that full on straight out extension. For these athletes, we might put them in 30 degrees of a flex brace, take pressure, allow that PCL to heal, so take pressure off of it. And then we will be careful or precautious kind of on that extension motion. So we might just do like a passive motion program with them for a couple weeks. And then gradually you start working on a more active motion, more active firing of those hamstrings and quad musculature. And so he's looking at anywhere from that kind of 3 to 6 week time frame and really starting to hit the therapy hard, hopefully back to, a jogging routine in the next, probably 14 to 21 days, and then probably a cutting routine somewhere around kind of 4 or 5 weeks, just depending again on the grade of this and swelling and obviously how he feels pain-wise. You might push that timetable out to where maybe he's not jogging until 5 or 6 weeks and maybe not cutting for 6 or 7.
Dr. Brandon, appreciate the time. We'll check in next week.
Okay, fellas. Take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time with you, Hail Varsity Wednesday edition. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody, Hail Varsity YouTube, and some final thoughts from Matt Rhule on some specifics with this 2025 class. Big thanks to Mike Schaefer. Big thanks to Evan Bland and Mike Babcock with us today. We'll check in with Mitch Sherman tomorrow. Gary Barnett with us. Brandon Vogel, maybe a surprise tomorrow as well. But here is Coach Rhule on Dawson Merritt.
Oh, man. I went and watched Dawson play a game this year, and I've always loved his mindset and who he is as a person, man. But, I texted him. We have a whole staff group chat, which is I don't know how many people Susan manages. It's a lot. And I was like, Dawson's a 5. This guy he's athletic, he's physical, he's smart. Man, he'll come. I told him this morning when I talked to him after he signed, I was like, come in ready to play, because he's got all the tools to come in and play and help us.
How about Latif at quarterback? More from Coach Rhule.
I love his accuracy. I love his release. I love his ability to progress, get through progressions. He brings a mobility element that's nice. He's a winner. He's confident. Glenn was, one of the first guys, seeing him and really liked him. And then I followed quick suit. And then Dana's on board as well. So I think TJ's a guy that, we earmarked, and we're able to get up here, and he liked it. And, I think he's going to be a really good player.
And Matt Rhule with the in-state talent, Elijah, those in-state gets are kind of your heartbeat. Cut 14 here from Coach Rhule.
This program means something to them. Representing their state means something to them. They all had options. They're all really good athletes. They all have the traits that you want. Christian Jones is, got as tough a mindset as a guy you can have. Yet at the same time, he, can run 10.8 in the 100 meter and can fly. And so, those guys all have those skills. Connor Booth had an amazing year. Jackson Carpenter, 10.5 100 meter. There's a lot of guys that we signed in state that really great athletes. I remember, Caden Vermoss came to our camp and it was like 4.49. And I was like, no doubt. Those guys all have the traits to come do it. A couple guys, the Tyson Terry and the Pierce Moveberry are banged up, but they'll get healthy. So we've been fired up from those guys since day one.
Let's hear about Simpson, the defensive lineman. Could he help out early? Cut 20.
I think it's when I watched his basketball tape. I mean, just unbelievable explosiveness, athleticism. You watch his senior tape in football, and it really shows up on the field. I mean, great, demeanor, gregarious, fun. But we're not looking for big, non-moving D linemen. We want guys who can get up the field, be athletic, and I think that's what you see with. That's what you see the growth in Ty. You look at Ty from, what he did last year to what he did this year. It was just such a huge jump. And I think Malcolm, Cade Petschok, those guys have that explosiveness where they can come in early and really be two guys, that help on that D-line. I think we have some really good young D-line prospects we've been excited about that are already here, but those guys will come in and add to it.
And I think that's what I was saying about Simpson to kick off the show. Like, you watch his high school highlights, and I know it's high school.
Dude's a baller.
But the amount of times that they leave him one-on-one in the backside, he's able to get off his block and chase down a running back from behind. It gets you a little excited.
Pretty elite athleticism. And I kind of like the comp, Randy Gregory, minus the Randy Gregory problems.
I know Von Miller's lofty.
With
Simpson?
No, with Dawson.
With Dawson? I still think Von Miller, it's lofty.
And I was thinking Myles Garrett, so I was not wrong with the 270. I was not thinking Vaughn.
Had to get that correction in.
Back tomorrow at 4. Thanks.